going to call this meeting to order of the House General Appropriations Subcommittee. Yesterday we heard House Bill 1734 by Representative Willard, and we asked him to come back today. And Representative Willard, if you would, you've got several members here who were here yesterday, so you might want to go ahead and...
I'd be happy to go back over what we discussed yesterday, Chairman. The resolution in front of you deals with what we call a compensation resolution. And as I mentioned to the members of the committee yesterday, frankly, I'm not someone who I would normally expect to come in with a compensation resolution. If you remember last year, we had one dealing with a gentleman who was in prison for 20 years, found out he was wrongly imprisoned. But I asked the questions, I think rightly so, as to why we were making a compensation resolution when there had not been prosecutorial misconduct. The court gave a appropriate trial, and thirdly, there was not anything as far as his legal defense that was provided by the state that was an error. And there was compensation given to that individual. I was, I think, the only one that got up on the floor to speak against that resolution. So I say this in preface to what I'm going to get into next. What you have before you is a compensation resolution dealing with the shooting death of Judge Roland Barnes. And the reason that we're bringing this before you is that we have in the state what we call an Indemnity Plan, where persons who are killed, quote, in the line of duty, whether it be a police officer or someone working for DOT, they have the same coverage. That is a payment made to their surviving spouse of $75,000. Now, the question was raised yesterday regarding Ms. Barnes and whether she received insurance. I have made a check, and the best that we can determine is Judge Roland Barnes had what was a state plan, which is 1 times the insurance provided under the group program. A Superior Court judge is an employee of the state. The background of this is that Judge Barnes served for about 20 years as a magistrate judge in Fulton courts, and many of those years he was being called upon to do the work of a Superior Court judge because of the caseload in Fulton County. He was appointed judge, I believe it was in 1996, as I recall, 96 to 97. Under the state plan, a judge has to participate in the Superior Court retirement plan for 10 years before there's any vesting of any benefit for a surviving spouse. Therefore, his being shot while on the bench, he was in a term that had he completed his term, his then existing term, he would have been past the 10 years by, I think, 2 more years, 12 years. So as a result of his being, I call it, shot in the line of duty, having been on the bench when this unfortunate killing occurred last year about this time, his surviving spouse, Claudia Barnes, will not be receiving a pension under the retirement plan. I've checked with the governor's office. They are in support of the resolution, so I wouldn't go bringing this to you if I didn't feel we had some support from the governor's office for this purpose. And I believe we can get it through the Senate as a resolution also. And I know the time frame is such that we need to get it moving because I've got to get them to waive their rules to have this done. But I suggest it is a way of our state saying to Claudia Barnes, by compensation, we are in deep regret of what her loss was, and the fact that because of what happened, she is not, as a surviving spouse, going to receive a pension as other widows would have their husbands or their spouses completed the time of 10 years vesting in the plan. Mr. Chairman, I'll be happy to answer any other questions that the committee may have.
Thank you. I think we have some questions. I don't see the lights yet, though. Okay. Who? I was going to say I don't have a Representative Maxwell, I think, is first. So.
Thank you, Chairman Roland. I appreciate you coming forward on this. I do have a couple of questions. You made in your initial comments that we have a law in place that if a state DOT employee or others are killed in the line of duty, that they receive $75,000 compensation. If that's in place and he's a state employee, why are we having to pass this resolution?
Good question, Representative Maxwell. It identifies by specific categories those persons who will receive it, and it identifies people in law enforcement. I don't have the exact language in front of me, but it started out a number of years ago as being a program designed for the state to give, it's called an indemnification program, to give a payment benefit. First, it began at $50,000 for police officers, sheriff deputies who were killed, pulled in the line of duty, whatever happened to them, a bit automobile accident or whatever. And that's been over the years gradually expanded with various law enforcement categories. And then we had the DOT, because unfortunately we're having those personnel. That was added to it as another step because these people were, quote, killed in the line of duty. But it does specify by specific job categories those who would have that benefit.
Follow up?
Sure, absolutely.
I really have, to be honest with you, have a problem with this.
I understand.
If he had gotten hit by a MARTA bus or had an automobile accident or dropped dead of a heart attack on the way in, we wouldn't be talking about this. I know it was a tragic situation that happened, but it not only killed him and a couple of deputies, I believe.
One deputy and his court reporter.
And then the gentleman that worked for the federal government.
Correct.
I just have a real problem in my mind of us doing something for him. I mean, I think that's part of personal responsibility.
Yes.
To have separate life insurance policies if our loved ones need, means that if we're not going to be here to provide, and they have some, going to have some needs, we need to provide private life insurance policies or private IRA accounts, private retirement accounts
yes.
that we can get to if we don't qualify or have not reached the vesting point in our company retirement program for life insurance. I'm going to have to vote against it.
Yes.
Honestly, I'll have to vote against this because I think that's a need that each private individual should take care of. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, Representative Maxwell. Chairman Special Rules Hill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And honestly, I didn't speak to Representative Maxwell at all about it. But as I mentioned yesterday, I will echo those same concerns. I'm in great sympathy to the loss of Mrs. Barnes' husband and the occurrences on there. But again, this year I have heard time after time, and I voted for some expansion of her retirement, but it seems that we have taken on the responsibility of giving everybody everything every time they ask, when they have not taken the responsibility, personal responsibility, if they've had the opportunity. And I quite honestly feel like Representative Maxwell, no matter how the person dies, the impact, financial impact of their passing is the same. And as I, as a professional person, I certainly say a judge has to be intelligent, professional, and should have a little bit of financial planning capabilities, was worried about my spouse doing this. I probably would have attempted to buy a bridge life insurance, at least for the period of time in which I would have become invested. I have the same opportunity with my employees who are not vested in my pension plan. Private industry, again, I believe it is part of personal responsibility. We're not leaving this woman destitute, as I understand it, that she's also in the process of suing the county for something that's really neither here nor there financially, but I don't believe that we have a real point of destitution here, and I'm afraid I'm going to have to vote against it. And I think we need to look overall as a state, maybe between now and next year, where we really want to go with all of these retirements, investings, and what percentage of the budget we end up wanting to give the world.
Yes.
So thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Let's see, Chairman of Banks and Banking Mills. Have a question?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Hill got into part of my question. there's a lawsuit against the county, to me that would suggest that the fault of negligence is with Fulton County. It's not with the state of Georgia.
That's right. In fact, go ahead and let me finish your question. I'm sorry.
Well, and that was my question was, if the fault lies with, if it is believed or alleged to lie with Fulton County, then why should the state be asked to, I'm assuming that it's based on your prior comments in regards to him being a state employee, and that's the
Yes,
only...
sir. Being a state employee, the fact that, let's say, he was in his term, no one expected what happened, of course, last March to occur, where the lives were taken of 3 people in the courthouse. And certainly it wasn't expected or planned, knowing this would happen. So all I'm suggesting is Judge Barnes and his family certainly say, well, today these are the type things you anticipate. Yes, a heart attack can be anticipated, perhaps health needs. But back to the point, you're right. This also, as indemnification, is done on the basis, although there's no claim against the state. She's not asserting a claim against the state. It is in recognition there will be no way of an action being instituted against the state through the indemnification. Now, there is a lawsuit pending against Fulton County because of the errors will say, and I'm not privy of all the facts of it, but the errors that they say occurred as far as the protection of the courthouse. And what happened is everybody knows the facts. So I think everybody has a right to pursue their loss, in this case, of the spouse by reason of negligent acts of someone. And I think the action, although it's against the individuals, the claim includes the county because they were employees of the county.
May I follow up, Mr. Chairman?
Absolutely.
What I'm struggling with is, this is a tragic, I mean,
Yes, sir.
you know, we all know that. But what do we say to the spouse that lost her husband in Iraq, that's a Georgia citizen, that's being paid through the state? You know, what do we say in that situation where he's 5 months away from a 30-year retirement? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what I'm personally struggling with, mm-hmm. is that those other 3 people that lost a spouse, if they were all married, I don't know. You know,
I don't know how you make an explanation of someone who's any spouse. Representative Mills, I guess we say that the situation colored differently with the soldier in Iraq. Service in the National Guard is a voluntary undertaking with the knowledge beforehand of what may be the ultimate risk. I don't think anybody faults what they do. This is certainly they'll be supported for their conduct and action. I don't think the judges recognize that every time you step on the bench there's a chance of your life being taken. I believe this is the first time it's ever occurred in our state, in the state's history.
Any further questions from the subcommittee? I don't see any further questions right now.
Thank you.
If we have anybody from the public that would like to comment one way or the other on this?
I didn't come on this bill, but
If you would, I'd ask you to come to the microphone because this is one of those webcasts, and it can't be. The audio won't be there unless you go to the microphone.
I didn't come here on behalf of this bill. I came on behalf of 2 others, but I share representation of Fulton County and want to express my support for what Representative Willard is doing.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public who would like to speak on this? Any further questions from the subcommittee? I want to acknowledge that the chairman of the Appropriations Committee, the House Appropriations Committee, is here, Chairman Harbin. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Mr. Parsons.
Let me just kind of state the posture of this right now. We know we're late in the session. If we were to pass this today, it would still have to pass the full Appropriations Committee. It would still have to go through rules, I'm sure. It would still have to be passed by the House before it goes over to the Senate, and then goes through that same process. So it would still have a ways to go. But if we don't take action on it, or if it didn't pass, then that's pretty much it. But if you pass it, it still has some hurdles to pass. So I just want to reemphasize that us passing this today doesn't put it in concrete. If there are there any other questions or any other comments from the subcommittee before the chair would entertain? Do you have any closing comments?
Not really, Mr. Chairman. I believe, pointed out to the committee the things that were a motivation of my bringing this particular resolution before appropriations, and that is that the deputy sheriff, tragic loss. There was a $75,000 indemnity payment as a result of his passing. The court reporter was not married. I know she had grown children, but just we're talking about pension plans such as that. Only those pension plans that we have in place usually provide for benefits to a surviving spouse, or if there may be a dependent children in some cases. And so this is the only one that I believe had a, quote, surviving spouse of the three.
Thank you. With this time, the chair would entertain a motion on this bill, House Resolution 1734, which would direct the sum of $75,000 to Mrs. Claudia Barnes. Is there a motion? Chair does not hear a motion, Chairman.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for coming.
Appreciate your time, Bill.
We have Chairman Schaefer here from the Senate, and he has two bills, I believe, which we're going to hear today. And let me get my agenda here. Senator Schaefer, if you would present to us for us to hear Senate Resolution 817.
Senate, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Senate Resolution 817 is a constitutional amendment called the Taxpayers Dividend Act. It was part of our Declaration for New Georgia that we all signed during the 2002 general election. Its intent is to limit how the supplemental budget may be used for spending. The amendment provides that the supplemental budget may only be used to increase state spending, number one, to make the mid-year education adjustment based on changes in enrollment, and number two, with a two-thirds vote of both the House and the Senate. Any funds left after those increases shall be used only for debt retirement, funding reserves, or cutting taxes. The amendment would not limit the growth in state spending like some of the other measures that have been proposed, and it wouldn't make any changes at all to how we develop our general budget. It will simply prevent the supplemental budget from being used except as outlined in the amendment. Critics will tell you that this will unduly burden our ability to spend money. I disagree. They'll also tell you that it will encourage the governor to use a higher revenue estimate, a lower revenue estimate, which I don't think will happen either, because if he misjudges the estimate, then he's forced to make the cuts himself while we're not in session. I appreciate your attention to this matter. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Senator. Chairman Hill has a question, I believe.
Senator Schaefer, in reading this, is it not true that this would also start getting our department heads in actually attempting to budget for a 12-month rather than a 6-month budget? It would force them to do that job, which they should be doing today anyway?
Yeah, absolutely right. I think the amendment, if it was adopted, would promote fiscal responsibility and encourage accurate budgeting. What happened all during the 1990s was that the governor would deliberately underestimate the revenue so that there would be an artificial surplus at the end of the year, and then those surplus funds would be spent rather hastily in the supplemental budget. If you look throughout the 1990s, virtually every dubious expenditure that was made in state government was made as part of the supplemental budget. when we Republicans were in a minority, we always bemoaned this practice. Now we're in the majority. You haven't seen those kinds of abuses, frankly, because there hasn't been much of a surplus in order to be spent in the supplemental budget. But I think this is a good practice that ought to be adopted no matter which party's in charge.
Thank you very much.
Chairman Smith, I have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Senator Schaefer, I do have a question going to flexibility. I know in some years past, it's been a decision of the leadership on appropriations in both chambers to issue the bonds earlier than they intended to take advantage of particular offerings and such as that. So that would mainly be my concern there. Is that flexibility, because it's money spent early that saves money later. So has anyone asked you that question before?
No one's asked that question, but it certainly would have the effect of reducing our flexibility. If we wanted to issue bonds early as part of the supplemental budget, we'd have to get a 2/3 vote in both chambers, which is more difficult, obviously, than getting a majority vote. And that's something that we as members of the General Assembly just have to balance.
Thank you.
Representative Parrish.
Senator, if I understand this correctly, the only thing that would be allowed under this in normal circumstances would be to fund educational needs that might come from that. And if you carry that a little bit further, most of the time, ever since I've been here, I guess, when we come back, there usually are some unfunded liabilities, you might say, with health care, such as Medicaid and this sort of thing. And we mentioned a bit earlier about trying to make department heads do a better job of budgeting and so forth like that. Well, I think those in education try to budget as best they can, because some of those things they just have no way of knowing. Same thing with the cost of some of your health care programs. They'll budget as best they can. And my question would be, what happens if we pass this and then we come back in midterm or to do a supplemental adjustment, and we have liabilities from the state standpoint to fund health care programs? I guess you would have to have a 2/3 vote to do that. But my question is, I think this would be very difficult, and it looks like that we'd be almost creating an unfunded liability out there with the hopes that we would fund it. And what would happen if you didn't have a 2/3 vote to do that? What would be the situation there?
Well, I mean, you answered the question in your question. You could solve that problem with a 2/3 vote, and the same thing would happen if you didn't have a 2/3 vote. That would happen if you didn't have a majority vote. You wouldn't be able to fund the liability. I don't think that you're going to have. I don't believe personally that you're going to have trouble getting a 2/3 vote to fund a shortfall in Medicaid spending. But again, that's something that you as the members of the committee will have to consider in deciding whether or not to move the amendment, this proposed resolution forward.
One more thing. And the other thing I have is Chairman Smith pointed out with his flexibility. If in the past there have been many times where the bonds have been rolled forward to do that in the amended budget so as to take advantage of better tax rates or interest rates, this sort of thing. And I just think that you're taking the flexibility away from the budget process. Now, I guess it's just a philosophical question about whether you want to do that or not, but I just have a problem with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Butch. I would close simply by saying that I think that if it's a worthwhile expenditure, we won't have any trouble getting a 2/3 vote of both houses to do that. I think that you're obviously more familiar with the operations of the House than I am, but in the Senate, where we haven't had any trouble getting a 2/3 vote when it was truly a worthwhile expenditure.
Senator, would you take some more questions?
Oh, certainly.
I don't see any questions. Any other questions from subcommittee? I had a couple of questions for you. I don't know even if you're familiar with the state of Texas and how they do their appropriations process. But it's my understanding, and I may be mistaken, it's my understanding that they only pass an appropriations bill every 2 years. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct, and that used to be the case in Georgia as well.
And the second question is, if this were approved, it's already been obviously been approved by the Senate. What kind of, if I could ask you, what kind of vote did y'all have? What was the What were the numbers?
There were 2 dissenting votes, so it was almost unanimously approved.
Do you have any idea or any feeling if the governor would support this?
Well, this would actually, if this actually made it all the way through the House, it wouldn't require the governor's approval because it's a constitutional amendment. It would go straight to the people on the election ballot.
Okay. I didn't realize that. I thought he still had to sign it. Okay, I think we have another question. Representative Mosley has a question for you.
Thank you, Senator. Texas, do they have some type of flexibility in 2 years? That's a long time to predict just what the economy is going to do. Do they not have any type of flexibility?
I can't speak authoritatively to what the Texas legislature does. I'm sure that they have a mechanism to make amendments to the budget if necessary, but I really can't speak with much authority on their procedures.
I think we have another question. Representative Governor's Floor Leader Golick has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Schaefer, Chairman Schaefer, I agree conceptually with where you're going on this thing, and I remember 10 years ago when our side of the aisle was in the minority. In fact, there was a lot of bemoaning on the uses and potential abuses of the supplemental budget. And I feel very comfortable in supporting this resolution to move forward in the process. Let me ask you, though, as we move forward, and I think Representative Parrish's comments are well taken as a possibility. You end up really getting down to a numbers game, if game is even the right word. It's not, regarding, well, what if we have a shortfall in Medicaid and Peach Care and the state health benefit plan? Then you're looking at a situation of, well, who's that important to? And in order to block that, because it will take 2/3, there's a very conceivable scenario whereby you'd have just 1/3 of the House who really may not have that much of an interest, perhaps, in Medicaid spending, the Medicaid program. Perhaps their constituencies are not subscribers to the Medicaid program or state health benefit, and therefore they may not have an interest from a parochial standpoint in supporting that. And so I can see Representative Parrish's concern about that. Let me pose this. I plan on supporting this and will make a motion at the appropriate time if I'm recognized to do so by the chair. Let me just ask you this, and for the edification of the members of the committee, would you be willing, as we continue in this process, to discuss the possibility of adding into a provision, I guess into into Section 2 of the resolution, the possibility of including shortfalls in programs such as Medicaid and state health benefit as we go on, not seeking to secure a commitment, but just to engage in a dialogue about that in order to keep it moving, but also recognizing the validity of the issue.
I certainly would be willing to do that, and if the full Appropriations Committee moves forward on this resolution, I'd be willing to work with you to offer an amendment to that effect with you and Representative Parrish.
And I'm not saying, Senator Schaefer, that I would necessarily seek to compel that. I support this conceptually, and this is walking the walk. We've talked the talk for a long time, but your Senate resolution here, your constitutional amendment, seeks to walk the walk, and it's just a matter of perfecting it. I'm not saying that's going to be that inclusion of that language will be necessary, but I think it's an issue to be discussed in deference to Mr. Parrish and perhaps other members. But as we go forward, just to vet it out without stopping the measure.
Certainly.
Okay, thank Chairman Hill has his light on for us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Schaefer, thank you very much for bringing this. I pretty much echo the floor leader's comments. I was pretty much going to say the same thing. I don't have as much of a concern about our ability to get 2/3, but I would have a concern if we go far beyond considering anything in Medicare. And I think if we look at that, and it might be worth looking at as we go to full committee, to make sure that we keep it very narrow in scope, and then ask when this goes to rules to be structured, because we can start nibbling away at this very easily. And I concur with Representative Parrish's comments that Medicaid is one other area that we sometimes have no control depending upon what the feds do. But I want to make sure that we're very cautious in how we approach that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Representative Maxwell has one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Schaefer. I too had the same concerns that Representative Parrish was talking about here and perhaps some other areas. I'm trying to read the amendment here on the second page, line 8, 7 and 8. A little help in understanding this. We're talking about to enact general appropriations to enact the General Appropriations Act, except the fund increase the government of school systems and under certain other circumstances. What is the certain other circumstances that would be under this line here?
Well, I think that refers to the two-thirds vote. I unfortunately don't have a copy of the resolution in front of me right now, but you're reading from the ballot question, is that right? That's how it was crafted by legislative council. I mean, I keep calling it the supplemental budget, but it's actually referred to as an amendment to the enacted Appropriations Act in the resolution that you have in front of you. It can be used, one, to make those adjustments in the education formula. It can be used for anything as long as there's a two-thirds vote. And then it can be used for paying down debt, funding reserves, and cutting taxes. And so I think that's why other circumstances is plural.
So that's what it's talked about on lines 20 and 21, I guess, on page 1. And that seems like an awful general statement to make there. Constitutional amendment.
I didn't like the way the constitutional amendment was worded either, because I don't think it really clearly communicates what the amendment does. And that may, if this moves beyond this committee and into the Appropriations Committee, that's something I'd be willing to work on too, drafting a referendum question that's more clear.
I would like to see that, I believe. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Are there any, I want to make sure I give you the opportunity. Are there any questions of the author? Any closing comments you'd like to make at this time?
No, thanks for your courtesy and for listening to me today.
Thank you. What I'd like to do at this time is I'm going to appoint we're late in the session, but we still have a lot of time to do, there'll be a lot of things done in the time we have left. Let's put it that way. I'd like to appoint a special subcommittee of this subcommittee. Representative Hurd, if you would chair a subcommittee, Representative Golick and Representative Parrish, if you would take this, and I'll ask you sometime to come back and advise this subcommittee on this resolution. It's very, very important resolution, very, very important proposal, and it's something we need to consider carefully. Thank you. You have a bill that you would like to present to us too. And that is Senate Bill 154.
Senate Bill 154 was passed by the state Senate, I think unanimously, during the last session. And with regard to public officials who enter into settlements on behalf of Georgia citizens, it provides that those settlement funds shall be appropriated by the General Assembly and not spent by the public official without any oversight. What drew this issue to my attention, frankly, was the settlement that the Secretary of State entered into on behalf of Georgia investors. She collected $5-some million in a settlement with investment firms on behalf of Georgia investors, and then spent that money on television ads promoting herself. What this bill would not prevent her or any other constitutional officer from entering into a settlement. It would simply say that the funds from that settlement would have to go through the appropriations process. We saw abuses of this by the Secretary of State, but it could conceivably apply to any public official, whether it be the Agriculture Commissioner or the Insurance Commissioner that looks out for Georgia citizens and could potentially enter into a settlement on behalf of Georgia citizens.
Any questions from the subcommittee on this bill? Senator, I don't see any questions at this time.
Thank you.
We're going to take that into consideration, but not take action today. Chairman Hill, Senate Appropriations, had a okay. Chairman, I apologize. I didn't realize you were going to present that bill.
No, that's okay. I'm here on behalf of Senator Hill on Senate Bill 556, if you will. This is really just a cleanup bill. We passed this last year. There was some language that was some disagreement with over the governor's office. That language has been cleaned up. All this is doing, this is really just cleanup language, establishing programs, taking out budget unit, taking out Brock where it is still in the code, establishing where it said legislative budget office. This establishes House budget office and Senate budget and evaluation office. And that is all this is doing. It is a very lengthy bill, but that's because we had to go through and where all the budget unit phrases were, change that out to programs. So I'll yield for questions, Mr. Chairman, if there are any.
All right, thank you, Chairman. Any questions on this bill? Any questions from members of the subcommittee? Yes, sir. Representative Black.
How does it differ from the bill passed on House?
Which one?
The one taken out Brock.
There were other sections. This is a bill we actually passed last year. 1373, I think, is the one you're referring to, Representative Black. And we did not deal with some of the language that was in here on Brock because it was passed last year under this bill. And we're just actually, Senator Hill went back and changed the language, or actually took it out, I think, that was the governor's office had some concerns about. And so this just handles what we did last year. But 1373 did not address the ones that are in here from last year. This goes further because Brock is no longer, it's not utilized, we're not using it, and really it's throughout the code, and we may find some other areas where it's mentioned in the code, and we may have to clean it up later down the road, but we think we've got most of it under this bill and under 1373.
Representative Parrish. What?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask you a question. I don't know the answer to it. I'm not sure it's really important, but it's the Senate Budget and Evaluation Office, and it's just the House Budget Office.
The House Budget Office is able to do evaluations and research and analyze the numbers, and they didn't feel like it was necessary that it absolutely be in the title. We think House Budget Office covers that. Senate felt that they wanted it in the title, so we're very accommodating.
It does a great job. I just didn't want us to be behind the curve here, naming our office.
HBO sounds so much better than HBEO.
Any other questions for subcommittee? I don't see any. The chair would entertain a motion at this time on Senate Bill 556. We have a motion to approve. A second, I believe, to approve Senate Bill 556 with a due pass recommendation to the full House Appropriations Committee. Any discussion? I hear none. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. Senate Bill 556 does pass the due pass recommendation to the full House Appropriations Committee. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. And with that, if there's no further business to be brought up, this subcommittee meeting is adjourned.